So we just wrapped our studio shoot where we're focusing on our monochromatic color scheme, and I just uploaded these in Capture One, and I want to go through with you guys the process that we went through and how we worked into our concept, and then we'll make some selects and get into the editing process. So this is our first image here. This is kind of where we get our light dialed in, and we didn't have our gel in the background yet, but we've got our key light and we've got our fill bouncing into the V-flat. And as you can see, everything is obviously red, but we've got this kind of mismatch between certain tones. This cardigan is on the orange side. This and the background are reading a little bit more on the pinkish side to me. And our jacket is basically where I want to be true red color-wise. It's a good starting spot, but I think we could do better, so we threw on our gel. And right away, you're going to see a really drastic impact between this guy and this guy. I mean, our color discrepancy is basically gone. We still get a little bit more saturation here, which is something that we can play around with, but in general, everything looks a lot more cohesive. You'll also notice that we've sort of brought our luminosity down a little bit in the red, so up here, it's a bit brighter feeling, a little more pink, slightly less saturated, and here, we're really bringing that red out, so we're kind of pushing it to its limits here, which I think looks pretty awesome. We talked about this concept, which is kind of building on this notion of red as being a warm color and then being a little funny with it and throwing all these layers on her. So we're kind of working into the concept, trying to get her to pose so she looks like she's cold. And then we start throwing a couple different layers on her. We get the puffy jacket on, just even more bulk. Throw the hood on her head. Again, getting into that pose. I like this one a lot. You'll notice here too that this puffy jacket has a little bit of a slightly different color tone to it. So if we end up using one of these, we can fix that in post, but just something to keep an eye on here. And now we've mixed it up. We've got the puffy jacket on the outside now. I like how it looks like it doesn't even fit her. She's got so many layers of clothes on here that she's popping out of them. We got the hat on her head. And again, just kind of working into these poses. Here we start to get a little creative. We got a little bit of haze in the background from our hazer. We've got our fire extinguisher, which is kind of like, wait, she's cold, but it's red, and there's fire, and why the hell is there a fire extinguisher in there? So, you know, just getting kind of weird with it, playing with your brain. A little bit more smoke for some ambiance. I really like this shot here. The pose is a little bit more contrived, I think, than I was kind of going for this particular image, but I actually still really like the shot. I love the expression on her face and how she's not really even looking into camera, and she's still with all these layers on, kind of got that vibe of being cold. And again, kind of working back into that pose. We have a little bit less smoke here, but she's really wrapping her arms around herself and definitely giving off a good pose for that cold vibe. And just a couple more. We had her take her jacket off. All right, so that's the gist of our images for our monochromatic palette. And I'm kind of feeling this shot, and I really like this shot. And I think we'll go with this guy for our retouch. So a little bit about my Capture One process. When I'm shooting in studio, I like to dial my lights in as much as possible so that I don't really have to adjust anything from a luminosity perspective in my raw file or in post. If I am going to make any adjustments in Capture One, it'll probably just be to that. So if I had an exposure that I wanted to bump up a little bit, maybe we could play around with that. And so you'll see too that when we bump this exposure up, our red is saturating a little bit more. We're probably bringing it a little bit closer to its inherent luminosity value. I actually don't mind that, maybe coming up just a little bit. The dynamic range sliders, these are probably where I'm going to spend most of my time if I'm messing around with that. So again, we don't really have a lot of super bright highlights in here, so this isn't going to do much. This is going to be pretty drastic here. And you'll see we're going to start flattening the image out if we get it up too high. So I am happy just to bump the exposure up here a little bit and kind of leave it at that. And that's pretty much it. That's kind of my starting point before I bring this into Photoshop and start playing around with it there. But as you can see, since we did so much of our color work with that gel and with the styling in the scene on set, we really don't have to do a lot here in Capture One. But I'll probably make a couple little tweaks in Photoshop, so let's open that up. TIFF 16-bit. I like to work in Adobe RGB. I know everyone's got a million different preferences for this. You've got a little bit more versatility than sRGB, and everything I'll probably export into sRGB when I post it online, because that's what websites like. But yeah, Adobe RGB is where it's at for me.